Breaking tonight, while America threatens annexation, Canada just signed the trade deal that changes everything. Beijing didn't hesitate, Carney didn't blink, and the country everyone said would cave to Washington pressure just chose strategic sovereignty instead. Competition is intensifying across North America tonight. Prime Minister Mark Carney proposed a comprehensive trade reset with China, but instead of cautious negotiation, Beijing accelerated commitment timelines. And the timing, hours after Donald Trump declared he doesn't need Canada or CUSMA. Everyone believed Canada's smaller economy would force capitulation to American demands. Wall Street expected Ottawa to abandon China trade completely. Analysts assumed Carney would prioritize Trump's approval over Canadian farmers. They were all utterly incorrect. Beijing, January 16, 2026. Standing beside President Xi Jinping after direct negotiations, Prime Minister Mark Carney made a statement that reverberated across Washington. Canada will build partnerships with reliable nations who respect our sovereignty. We will not be bullied into economic dependence. Translation: Ottawa just told Trump that Canadian autonomy is non-negotiable. And what happened next? The Prime Minister, who invested in the diplomatic preparation, reveals exactly why Canadian resilience is reshaping North American power dynamics while American leverage collapses. Let's be clear about what Carney just accomplished in his first major trade negotiation as Prime Minister. Canada will allow up to 49,000 Chinese electric vehicles into the Canadian market at a 6.1% tariff rate. Compare that to the 100% punitive tariff Justin Trudeau imposed in 2024 when he was desperately trying to please Washington. In 2023, China exported 41,678 EVs to Canada. This deal returns to normal commercial levels, but under Canadian terms. China will drop canola seed duties to 15% by March 1st. From 84% combined tariff levels to 15%. That's a $4 billion market for Canadian farmers that Trudeau's capitulation to American pressure nearly destroyed completely. Canadian canola meal, lobsters, crabs, and peas will be freed from Chinese anti-discrimination tariffs from March 1st until at least year-end. Nearly $3 billion in export orders for Canadian farmers, fish harvesters, and processors unlocked in a single negotiation. But here's what the mainstream media won't tell you. This isn't just about tariffs and quotas. This is about the fundamental choice between American chaos and strategic partnerships, between dependence and sovereignty, between following orders and forging your own path. Dear viewers, between November 2025 and January 2026, something extraordinary happened in Canadian trade relationships. Trump pushed too hard. Carney said no. And China, professional, patient China, became the partner Ottawa started calling first. Remember the timeline? November 2025, Carney wins the federal election on a platform of economic sovereignty. December 2025, Trump begins threatening Canada with annexation rhetoric, claiming we're America's 51st state. January 13th, 2026, Trump declares he doesn't need Canadian goods or CUSMA, calling the agreement irrelevant just 3 days before Carney's Beijing trip. The pattern was deliberate. Trudeau had levied those 100% tariffs on Chinese EVs in 2024 specifically to please Washington. Trump had imposed similar penalties first, and Trudeau followed like an obedient junior partner. Beijing retaliated in March 2025 with tariffs on more than $2.6 billion of Canadian farm and food products. Canola oil, canola meal, and then canola seed in August. The result? China's imports of Canadian goods dropped 10.4% in 2025. Canadian farmers suffered. Chinese consumers found alternative suppliers. And for what? To maintain the illusion that following American demands would somehow protect Canada from Trump's chaos. Carney looked at that equation and made a different calculation. If Washington won't respect Canadian sovereignty anyway, why sacrifice billions in trade to appease them? Beijing, January 16th, 2026. Carney becomes the first Canadian Prime Minister to visit China since 2017. 9 years of frozen relationships. 9 years of letting American priorities dictate Canadian foreign policy. 9 years of pretending that ignoring your second largest trading partner was somehow good strategy. Carney met directly with President Xi Jinping. Not a phone call. Not a video conference. Face-to-face negotiations between two leaders who understand that strategic relationships require mutual respect. And here's the part that should terrify Washington. When asked directly whether China was a more predictable and reliable partner than the United States, Carney didn't dodge. He didn't deflect. He said this: "In terms of the way our relationship has progressed in recent months with China, it is more predictable." And you see results coming from that. Read that again. Canada's Prime Minister just declared publicly that Beijing is more predictable than Washington, more reliable than the country that claims to be our closest ally, while simultaneously threatening annexation. Translation: the era of automatic American alignment is over. Canada will work with partners who respect sovereignty regardless of what Washington thinks about it. Carney framed this deal around Canada's clean energy future, and that framing matters. For Canada to build its own competitive EV sector, we will need to learn from innovative partners, access their supply chains, and increase local demand. Notice the language. Innovative partners. Not adversaries. Not threats. Partners who can help Canada build industrial capacity rather than demanding Canada remain a resource colony. He pointed specifically to strengthen partnership with China in clean energy storage and production, driving new investments. He said he expected the EV pact would drive considerable Chinese investment into Canada's auto sector, create good careers, and speed Canada towards a net zero future. This is industrial policy. This is what building a sovereign economy looks like. You don't develop advanced manufacturing capacity by putting 100% tariffs on the world's leading EV producers and hoping domestic companies somehow catch up. You create structured partnerships that allow technology transfer, supply chain integration, and market development. Compare that approach to Trump's. Washington imposes tariffs, declares victory, and watches American companies struggle with higher input costs while Chinese manufacturers simply find other markets. Ottawa negotiates quotas, ensures Canadian benefits, and positions domestic industry to actually compete. And make no mistake, the pressure on Carney to abandon this deal was immense. Ontario Premier Doug Ford publicly urged the Prime Minister to not back down on tariffs for Chinese EVs. The same provincial politicians who spent years demanding Ottawa protect the auto sector without ever explaining how punitive tariffs accomplish that goal. Trump declared he doesn't need Canada on January 13th, 3 days before Carney arrived in Beijing. That wasn't coincidence. That was deliberate timing designed to humiliate Ottawa and force Carney to come home empty-handed. The message was clear: abandon China, accept American terms, or face economic warfare. Choose dependence or destruction. Carney chose sovereignty instead. He signed the deal. He stood beside Xi Jinping. He told reporters that China is more predictable than America, and he came home with nearly $3 billion in agricultural export orders for Canadian farmers who have been suffering since Trudeau's capitulation to Washington destroyed their market access. Let's zoom out and understand what just happened in the broader context of North American power dynamics. For decades, Canadian foreign policy operated on a simple assumption: stay close to Washington, follow American leads on trade policy, accept that Canadian interests are subordinate to American preferences, and in exchange, assume America would respect Canadian sovereignty. That assumption is dead. Trump killed it. Now, not Carney, Trump. When the President of the United States publicly suggests annexing Canada, when he declares CUSMA meaningless, when he threatens tariffs on allies while praising dictators, the entire logic of automatic alignment collapses. Why sacrifice economic opportunities to please a partner who doesn't respect your existence? China, by contrast, offered Carney something Washington never has: predictable professionalism. Beijing wanted market access. Ottawa wanted agricultural exports. They negotiated terms. They signed an agreement. They both benefited. No annexation threats, no state jokes, no public humiliation. Just two sovereign nations conducting normal trade negotiations based on mutual benefit. And that's the model Carney is building. Not choosing China over America, choosing partnerships over dependence, choosing strategic sovereignty over reflexive alignment. This is a preliminary deal. Carney explicitly billed it as such, the foundation for much more comprehensive economic cooperation. And that matters because it signals where Canadian trade policy is heading under this government. Diversification, not putting all economic eggs in the American basket, building relationships across the Pacific, across Europe, across Latin America, treating every partner as a sovereign equal, and demanding the same respect in return. Conditionality. These aren't permanent tariff eliminations. Canada expects China to drop canola seed duties to 15% by March 1st. Chinese tariffs on Canadian products are lifted until at least year-end. Both sides maintain leverage. Both sides can adjust if circumstances change. Industrial strategy. The EV quota isn't just about cars, it's about technology transfer, supply chain development, and building Canadian manufacturing capacity. Carney explicitly framed this around learning from innovative partners to build Canada's own competitive sector. And perhaps most importantly, this deal sends a message to every other nation watching North American dynamics right now. Canada is open for business. Canada respects sovereignty. Canada won't sacrifice partners to please Washington's chaos. Between Carney's election in November and this Beijing deal in January, Canadian foreign policy fundamentally transformed. From reactive to strategic, from dependent to sovereign, from assuming American benevolence to demanding mutual respect. The agriculture sector gets $3 billion in market access. The auto sector gets structured EV imports that enable learning and development. Canadian farmers get relief from the punitive tariffs Trudeau's American appeasement created. And Canada gets something more valuable than any single trade deal. Proof that sovereignty works. That you don't have to choose between economic prosperity and political independence. That strategic partnerships based on mutual respect deliver better results than subordination based on historical habit. Trump wanted Carney to come home empty-handed, humiliated, forced to accept that defying Washington has consequences. Instead, Carney came home with signed agreements, agricultural exports, and a public statement that Beijing is more predictable than Washington. Translation: the era of Canadian dependence just ended. The era of strategic sovereignty just began. And the Prime Minister, who everyone said would cave to American pressure, just proved that Canada charts its own course now. This isn't just about EVs and canola. This is about the fundamental transformation of Canadian foreign policy from reliance to resilience, from dependence to sovereignty, from following orders to forging partnerships. And it's working.